Hi, this is Pete from the Humans Connecting team. Now, our podcast is all about serving, supporting, challenging, and inspiring you to become a connected human. But look, the content of this podcast, it's really more of a general nature. And consuming this content, it's really not the same as seeking individual advice from a connection mentor, a coach, or a registered mental health professional. We're here to have conversations about human connection which address loneliness. But look, it's much more than that. Here at Humans Connecting, we're on a mission to destigmatise loneliness, and we do this by talking about loneliness openly. The thing is though, loneliness conversations can include a range of topics which at times might be difficult for us to talk about, or to hear, or to sit with. So if throughout our conversations you find this to be true for you, we encourage you to please contact a mental health hotline. Now, don't worry, there's links in the episode description that can help you find some immediate support from many of the countries and the locations that you might be listening from. Our only advice to you is this: meet yourself where you are and how you are right now. If you don't feel up to it, hey, that's okay. We'll be here, ready and by your side when you're ready to go. Oh, look, we're so glad that you're here. Let's jump in.
Hello, it's Phil. Welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast. Thank you for choosing to spend part of your day with us here at the Humans Connecting podcast. We're so excited for you to join the conversation I recorded with Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, he of long distance love bombs fame, about our whispering hearts. And the episode is all about navigating change in our lives. It's about quietening our screaming minds and tuning into our whispering hearts. Because our hearts are calling us to connect and to be our wonderful and, well, frankly, weird-assed selves. And if you've made any effort to listen to your whispering heart and then take steps towards what it's calling you to do, you know that what it's calling you to do can feel really scary, really overwhelming, and, well, pretty awful. Dr. Jeremy and I will support you on this episode as we navigate our fear, overwhelm, and discomfort. And in case you're new here, I just wanted to say hi. I'm Phil McAuliffe, and I'm the founder of Humans Connecting. I'm a global loneliness thought leader, and I'm the host of this podcast. And when I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm a speaker on loneliness and human connection. I'm a media commentator, an author, a connection mentor, and I'm a human who is endlessly curious about humans and the human condition. And our work at Humans Connecting has two main goals. Firstly, it's to destigmatize loneliness. And then secondly, it's to help you, however you identify as a human, wherever you are in the world and whatever you do in the world. We're here to help you to get the connection that you need and that you absolutely deserve. We're right here for you at humansconnecting.org when you're ready to feel more connected and better equipped to respond to loneliness when you next experience it, including navigating through the fear, overwhelm, and the shitty discomfort that comes when we start to do connection. And finally, we're a new podcast here at Humans Connecting, and Humans Connecting is a fledgling social and impact enterprise. And we've got bold ambitions to help the world feel more connected because the humans in the world are feeling connected to themselves, to those most important to them, and to their communities. And if this episode or any of our other content makes you think, supports you, challenges you, or inspires you, please know that sharing this episode with just one other person or leaving a 5-star review are both great and free ways for you to say thank you to us for what we've provided and to support someone else who you know would benefit from our wisdom, insights, and perspectives. Whatever you choose to do, we wanted to say thank you right now for your support. Now, to our guest. Our mutual friend, Mike Campbell, introduced me and Jeremy last year. Now, Mike's a very special human in each of our lives, and Mike's program helped me. Well, it gave me when I was lost and lonely. Mike's now a friend, a trusted mentor, and an absolutely huge supporter of the work that we're doing here at Humans Connecting and my previous work at The Lonely Diplomat and The Loneliness Guy. So, Mike, for when you're listening and or watching, just want to say thank you so much for both your support and for introducing me to Jeremy. And if you're unfamiliar, listener, viewer, with Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, I'm going to read Jeremy's bio because it's like a stunning summary of what it's like to be in his company. So these are in Jeremy's words. I'm a compassion cultivating, day making change agent, an empathy collecting, anti quitting word wizard, and a ferocious never giver upper. I'm a connoisseur and a collector of fine silver linings, and my mission is to make kindness cool and compassion commonplace. And I want to make the world better than it was yesterday. My name is Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, and I worked internationally for governments and universities for a decade, researching and writing a PhD about how our brains influence our actions. I've managed teams of people and millions of dollars, gave a TEDx talk called What If Kindness Was Cool, hosted more than a dozen retreats on 4 continents, including an annual 200-kilometer Spanish pilgrimage, and wrote a book called It'll Be Okay, and You Will Be Too. An American Australian word dork living in Canada, I'm an ordained minister, scuba diving instructor, recovering scientist turned author, podcast host, spoken word poet, and giver of keynotes who speaks fluent burrito. I work as a life coach, but I'm more of a dream doula. People pay me to make them cry, sometimes in delight, and sometimes as we confront the stories they hide behind. The core of my work is grounded in conviction excavation, reminding people of their inherent agency and realizing that beliefs are choices that influence malleable identities. My clients borrow my faith in them while we grow theirs together. I use writing as a medium to help people deal with life and themselves, and believe creative thinking can stimulate healing, inspire epiphanies, and propagate aliveness. My podcast is one of the top 1% globally with nearly 600,000 downloads and over 200 episodes. You probably follow many of my guests from the personal development industry, including several New York Times bestsellers and numerous therapists and thought leaders. What an introduction. I'm in awe of all of these words, I have to say. So without further ado, let's start listening to our Whispering Hearts with Dr. Jeremy Goldberg. In starting this conversation, Jeremy, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast.
Thanks, Phil. Good to be here, man.
I'm really curious. I'm really curious. In reading, having read out that bio, what does fluent burrito sound like?
Oh, speaking fluent burrito, I think you're alluding to.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, man, but for me, it's like the perfect meal. It's portable, it's delicious, there's variety, it's easily accessible.
Yeah.
Its cost, its cost is reasonable. And I don't know, I just like the phrase being able to speak fluent burrito. Like I speak fluent burrito to me is just poetic and absurd and hilarious. And it strikes me as one of those lines, like all good writing, perhaps, that leaves a little bit of interpretation open to the listener or the reader. but
Mm.
also it conveys an idea. This is like, yo, I speak fluent burrito. Like I've spent enough time there. I know the language. I know the lay of the land. It's my mother tongue.
I I love it. Like there's like I'm a huge fan of language, right? And like me and words are friends. Most of the time. But this like what I love about that is that it conveys like it's a sensory kind of it conveys like a sensory experience of like and kind of taking something from listening to people sort of talk about like um wine tasting or coffee tasting or something. It's all about the mouth feel, and that balance of like rice and the fillings and the herbs and what else is in there? Like sour cream, the coriander, cilantro, depending on where you're from. Um, yeah, like it talks about mouth feel of that, and yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I just think I'm a word dork, right? And I'm a writer. I'm a speaker, and I'm just perpetually um, inspired by language that elevates an experience, that can connect, that can resonate with others. And I think that words are a big part of what I do. They're a big
Mm.
part of what I teach. And I think you also understand and have lived the power of stories and descriptions and identities and belief systems. And I think it's just a core part of the human experience to attempt to understand the unexplainable mystery that is occurring within and around us at all times. And so I'm
Yeah.
just like, I'm into words, I'm into descriptions. I am perpetually on I describe like a quest to collect silver linings, to become a connoisseur of silver linings. It's so just the language that surprises and delights, I think, uh, is good and worth pursuing.
Yeah. One of the things I'm like paying attention to the chills that I'm getting after like hearing this because I'm like I'm ready to nerd out. But one of the things that's occurring like to me with me like now, Jeremy, is one of the things here at Humans Connecting, and I give it's one of my keynote topics. Um, and it kind of stems from my own lived experience, which is an expression that I really don't like. I don't like the expression lived experience because it kind of places loneliness and the need for human connection as some kind of like otherworldly kind of thing to observe. But knowing that all humans experience loneliness and knowing that all humans are meant to experience loneliness, so we then get the connection that we need. One of the things that we here at Humans Connecting do is destigmatize loneliness. And to destigmatize loneliness, we need to talk about it openly. We need to say loneliness. We need to sit with it. We need to do all of the things with loneliness so we understand it and we can um, understand the thoughts and feelings that come up and that we recognize it and go, we need to do something with that. This is made all the harder when we don't talk about it, when we don't use words. So when and we've kind of lost the ability to speak the language of loneliness. And so that's the topic of one of my keynotes, which is like the language of loneliness. How do we talk about loneliness? How do we speak of our own loneliness when we experience it? How do we receive stories of loneliness when others bravely and courageously share theirs with us without pity, without resorting to fixing it, without going within ourselves and sitting with that discomfort that comes with someone sort of essentially coming out as lonely to us? One of the things that you're saying there that's really giving me this kind of full body reaction that I'm just paying attention to here is the power of words to convey. You said the word absurd, but within absurdism, and absurdities. There are sort of, those absurdities give us some kind of way to sit with things that really don't kind of compute other ways, in other ways. So I just wanted to say, like, as someone who, like, part of my role here at Humans Connecting is to help teach people the language of loneliness, and teach the world the language of loneliness. What you've just described there is such a powerful tool, and I don't know if you even thought you were even doing it, but it was such a powerful tool there that sitting with the absurdity of language allows us to actually, like, contemplate things in a completely different way, and sit with the experience, even if that experience is the awesomeness of a burrito.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for that. Right. Well, that took like a real kind of turn that I hadn't anticipated, like right off the bat. But I've got a feeling that this chat, Jeremy, could be a whole lot like that.
Yeah, I'm a little bit renowned for chasing rabbit holes, uh, flirting with tangents, telling stories. I like to encourage that in my own work as well. When I have guests on my podcast, I
Yeah.
make sure to highlight at the start before we record, like, take this anywhere you want to go. Like, follow your passion, chase the light. I'd rather I'd rather have individuals talking about something that lights them up, however random and ridiculous that might appear, than going through the motions of the job interview energy, or the sitting in the principal's office energy, or the rapid interrogation energy that sometimes comes across. So I'm sure you've talked to people that will slide into the monotone, memorized spiel that they've given 100 times. That's just like they're pushing the play button in their brain of like, oh, here's my canned 4-minute response to that question. And I'm like, I don't want that. I want the real stuff. I want the humanity. Like,
Yeah.
let's get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the irony, like, this is Humans Connecting. So yeah, and no, totally there for that. I was a public servant, an Australian public servant, worked as a diplomat for, like, worked in diplomacy for a long time as part of my career. Um, and yeah, surrounded by people who could speak for half an hour, and say absolutely nothing, and make you feel good, for saying, and I can do that still myself, and the way to connection is not paved through those kind of conversations.
Yeah. My high school Spanish teacher once told me, hablas mucho pero dices poco,
Yeah,
meaning you talk a lot but you don't say much. And I still remember that. That was a long time ago, but
yeah,
I think it carries over to some of the work that I do, and the content that I create, which is like, how do you distill a big idea in a succinct, efficient manner? Like, how can
mm,
you trim the fat? How can you just get right to the core message? And I think for communication in general, if we're gonna dork out on words for a minute, whether that's writing things on the internet, or having a conversation with a partner or a friend about something that's challenging or difficult, there are certain ways to describe experiences that communicate what you're trying to get across in a way that is, I was going to say pungent, but precise, or
yeah,
uh, sharp, right?
punchy. Yeah,
Punchy. And like, yeah, one way to describe that, I had somebody on my podcast once, and who was it? He works with men, and he says one of the most powerful words you could use is simply ouch. And so if you're having a conversation with your partner or a loved one and they say something, it's just ouch. And that simple 4-letter word describes so much. Like, rather than, let me take a breath and drop into my heart space, and what I'm feeling is the sting of betrayal right now. It's just like, nah, fuck that. It's just ouch. That and we all understand what that means, right? If I said that to you, you said something to me and I said, ouch, and I meant it. It's like, oh. So I'm into that, man. As a lazy human that would rather have a 4-minute conversation with my partner rather than an hour and a half long conversation, I'm always looking for ways to streamline those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
yeah, make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, the ouch is a great first response, that then we can create the space, should we decide to then drop into our heart and all that, and sort of sit with the experience first. Feel the feelings first before thinking about the response, I think, is always a really good way to go. Which kind of brings me to like the question, and what I wanted to have you on the podcast for, and the topic is about how you said in the past. And in some format, I can't really remember, but I remember it kind of landed with me, not with a thud, but like it kind of like it really sort of echoed in me that fear roars. Please feel free to correct me, but the way I understood it was fear roars, fear yells, and the heart whispers. And to me, that goes to how we can fear change. And what does that expression, first of all, did I get that expression right? And feel free to correct me. But second of all, what does it mean for you?
I think maybe that's the Australian interpretation. The American interpretation was shouts, like fear
Yeah,
shouts, heart whispers. But
yeah.
it's pretty close. And even as you say that, I was thinking fear roars kind of sounds smoother, and I like that. Perhaps anyway. What was the question?
Just
What
in the
does it mean,
word,
and
yeah.
why are we
Yeah, what does
scared
it
to
mean to
change?
you? Yeah.
Yeah, I just realized years back that whenever I am considering a decision or whether or not to do something, I would find that there would be a little what I call heart whisper inside advising me as a loving companion or supporter or cheerleader that was very soft and subtle and persistent. And it might be, for example, "Psst, quit your job. Psst, like, quit your job." And then in my brain, the fear would start shouting, and the fears would be loud, right? But a what's the phrase? A dog with a loud bark isn't a good dog. So the fears start shouting, and it's like, you can't quit your job. How will you make money? You've been doing this for years. Why would you give up now? What will your dad think? How are you going to support yourself? You'll be an embarrassment. Shout, shout, shout. Roar, roar, roar. Meanwhile, under the surface, I would hear this little persistent whisper saying, "Psst, quit your job. Psst, leave your partner. Psst, ask that person out on a date. Psst, call in sick, whatever. Psst, buy a one-way flight to Italy." Right? And so these little intuitive nudges would be offering guidance from somewhere deep and mysterious. And I found that they would be oftentimes in direct conflict with the reasonable, rational, self-preserving screams in my analytical mind. And that was really fucking confusing. I hope I can cuss on here because I think I've done that twice now. You can edit it out
Yeah.
later.
No. I'm all for it.
Okay.
All for it. All for it. And like for God's sake, we're
Okay.
grown-ups here. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that's like the origin of that. And then I think to your point, change often inspires a lot of energy to move, right? And it's uncertain, it's unknown. None of this is rocket science, but not all change is feared. I would say some change is feared. Like if I said to you, Phil, hey, tomorrow, guess what? I've hired a masseuse to come give you a massage. And as a bonus, they're going to leave a suitcase full of money with you. And oh, and then a private chef's coming over for the whole week, and they're gonna cook all your favorite meals, and that's it. Like that's a big change. That's a shift. But I doubt that that would evoke terror in you, right? I doubt that that would cause you to have a panic attack or an anxiety attack. And so I think it's an important distinction that it's not necessarily change itself that is the thing that causes fear. It's the type of change, or it's the type of fear, and it's the story that we tell ourselves about the change and about the fear. And there's this poet, David White, that has this killer line that says something like, it's not the thing you fear that you have to be scared of, but rather the mother of the thing you fear, the very thing that has given birth to the nightmare. And I may have botched that a little bit, but essentially what he's discussing is go a little deeper, like think a little better. Like you're not actually scared of the change in this example. You might not even be scared of the fear, but rather, perhaps, for your consideration, you might be scared of the thing that gave birth to that nightmare, which is the story about what the change means to your life. And so in my example, it was, what will my dad think? How will they make money? Etc. And so those stories that were embedded in my body somewhere, somehow, were the actual thing that I was scared of. I wasn't
mm,
scared of quitting the job or leaving the partner or starting the company or launching the podcast. Like that's just the shiny object that attracts the attention. The more meaningful discourse internally is understanding and unpacking like what's going on? Where does that come from? And I think that's the real interesting part. And a good coach, a good therapist, a helpful friend can guide you or nudge you towards those types of perspectives, which might be living and hiding in your blind spots. It's like, oh, dang, you're right. I'm not scared of that. What I'm really scared of is this secret thing that gave birth to the nightmare. Oh my goodness. And then once you've identified that, I like to say that clarity is a potential antidote to anxiety. So like once you have that clarity, it's like, oh, like
yeah.
that's what's really going on. Well, then you can start to interrogate that and you start to, make some moves. That makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things I love to do in recording these podcasts, as you take a swig of your enormous tea there, it's almost like you need like two handles and like a sippy cup kind of thing there. Like, um, but one of the things here is that's those last few minutes are just so chock full of wisdom. Um, and one of the things here at Humans Connecting that I've learned working in loneliness and human connection for the last few years across a few platforms and within my own loneliness as I began, to enter middle age. Um, and one of the things there was, I sum it up like this, that loneliness does a dance. It's in a troika, um, like this kind of this dance with loneliness, shame, and trauma. And loneliness is often an unintended consequence of our response to shame and or trauma in our past that led us to create stories, which to me and for many of the people that I've supported and that we support here at Humans Connecting, sounds like I didn't want that to happen again. So my response as a child, as an adult, as an early adult, or as an adolescent, generally as an adolescent, was I'm not going to do that ever again. I'm not going to put myself in a position where that can ever happen, where people won't laugh at me, people won't take advantage of me, people won't do this, that, or the other to me. They won't think badly of me. So I won't show up. I will edit myself. So I will say the thing, I will do the thing, I will like dress the thing, I will act the thing that will only get me good judgment because that felt horrible and I don't want that to happen again. And it works. It works. And then loneliness kind of like comes along and I feel, very commonly in midlife, in this situation, where it stops working. That response stops working. And there's whispering, there's roaring within, that becomes harder and harder to do. But in sitting with loneliness, like you start to unpick loneliness, and this is the shitty thing. This is the really shitty thing. But the lessons there are in like sitting with the mother of the loneliness, which often is the shame and trauma. And loneliness itself sounds very mathematical, but loneliness itself is shameful and traumatic. It's like shame is traumatic, and not speaking about it, not allowing it to be, and avoiding it creates loneliness. It is like this triangle where, and Jeff, my partner, he's an architect, and triangles are like some of the strongest shapes. There's a reason that, triangles are used in architecture and in engineering because they're really strong. And this is a really powerful triangle that we have within us. And we want to do the thing that I'll just kind of like scratch away at the loneliness enough. But if we're really doing it, we need to sit with the shame and the trauma, which feels hard, But oftentimes our heart, which has been whispering, like maybe not wants to do it, but knows that that's the way through it. And our head can be like, nope, shut up, don't say it, no, don't say it, just keep on putting the mask on, show up as, people are relying on you, you can't be you can't say that, you can't do that, what will people think, all that kind of stuff. This is really powerful.
Yeah. I agree, man. And loneliness sucks. Like there's no way around that.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to recognize that there's different perspectives on shame and trauma, right? Like there's a healthy shame that can arise from learning a lesson, from recognizing that you did a certain thing a certain way and that wasn't helpful or the best approach. And okay, I'm loved and supported through this shame that I'm experiencing. You could be held in a community or a partnership, a relationship. And then post-traumatic growth, right, is a thing that exists whereby trauma breaks you in some regard. And then you build back better, you heal, you learn, etc. And so I think the same thing can be said of loneliness, which is, yeah, it might really rattle you for a while. Like Khalil Gibran, this great poet, says, the deeper what does he say? Khalil Gibran says, the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Right? And so the more that sorrow and despair and grief and shame and loneliness literally carves you open emotionally, energetically, socially, what it's doing is hollowing out a space whereby one day, possibly, you will contain more joy and bliss and connection and love and presence. And so just that as an idea, I think, can plant a seed in people that, hey, you know what? I feel so awful right now. I am going to explode, or I am going to explode with emptiness. I am a empty shell. Like, I know I've been there many times, uh, at a table of friends, at a crowd of people. You can still feel isolated and alone and lonely and shame filled, right? And that capacity to feel so intensely with such an overwhelming amount of emotion or sensation in your system is the same set of tools and resources that will one day allow you to carry an equivalent amount of the opposite, right? And so I just love that perspective. I remember reading that line years ago and being like, damn, that's good. And
Mhm.
even though I hate that idea and don't really believe it right now, I'm going to do everything that I can to choose that it is possible. Right. And in the darkness of this bleak, destitute landscape that is my life right now, I'm going to believe that it is possible for an alternative to present itself one day. Like, I don't know how that's going to happen, but I've read enough on the internet and I've heard enough stories, and I believe that there are miracles that occur. And so I'm going to keep that light on, however tiny and far-fetched and far away it might appear. Like, I'm going to choose to keep that flame on amidst the darkness. And I've had my own personal experiences with this years ago. When I was finishing my PhD, I named my experience the Valley of the Suck, Phil, because I was too far from the beginning to quit.
Yeah.
It's too far. Can't go home.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
remember how to get back there. But I was also too far from the end to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so I was just marching on metaphorically through the mud and the muck, like, God damn, this is awful. This is, I have an empty vessel somehow shipwrecked again and again and again. And when I thought that I was on rock bottom, it turns out rock bottom fell away and there's like another layer of it. It was like, man, how did the floor of rock bottom just fall apart? Like, now I'm with the scorpions and the pigs and the spiders. Like, man, this is awful. And after I'd spend enough time dragging my face along rock bottom, I joke that I invested in property there. Phil, I joke that I purchased a summer home at rock bottom so that I could be comfortable when I visited, and you know, had my own little yard that grew nothing, but I was so comfortable in that loneliness and that
Mhm.
despondence that it eventually recognized that rock bottom was a solid foundation upon which to build a new me and a
Yeah.
new perspective and a new identity. And that to me was the turning point.
It's like rock bottom is stripping away of all the bullshit.
Yeah. Like, you can't hide. There's no more hiding there. It's just
No.
it's just like a confrontation with the intensity of the lived experience that
Mm.
is brutal. I read this thing the other day by Andrea Gibson that said something like, what if pain is a sign of your spirit not breaking, or something like that? I
Mm.
was like, that's good. What if pain was a sign of your strength materializing, or if something like that? I was like, dang, like, so the same thing is possible here. Like, what if loneliness is a sign of your spirit not breaking. Like, what if your despair is actually an indicator that you're still alive, and you're not drowning?
No.
Like, 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 or maybe you are. Maybe it feels like you're drowning.
Yeah.
But I realized years ago that if I was thinking I was drowning, then what was happening is it's just a funky version of swimming. Like, if I'm drowning, like, I'm still getting some breaths. I'm like, I'm still not defeated yet. I'm not sinking completely, right? Um, I wrote this poem years ago about uh, my mom's battle with addiction, and towards the end I said something like, I was thinking I was sinking because my arms were numb. What was it? I was thinking I was sinking because my arms were numb, and I something. But the point of the poem was I wasn't done yet, right? I wasn't done yet. And I think that that is just such a vital thing that is easy to overlook amidst the exhaustion that loneliness creates. It's like,
Mm,
I'm still here, motherfucker. Like,
mm,
you've not
mm-hmm.
beat me yet. Like, it feels like I'm on the canvas again and again and again. I can't get up and I keep getting knocked down, but like, I'm still here.
Yep.
Uh, so I think there's just something so powerful about that perspective.
Yeah.
Like, I've like worked with some very lonely, depressed, traumatized individuals. And when I've shared that perspective with them, which is like, yo, you're a beast. Like, you are a resilient, badass human being. Like, the pounding you are taking by life, like, again and again and again, like, respect. Like, and you're on this call or you're listening to this podcast right now, and like, you're still like, you have faith in yourself to the point that you know that there's potential options out there to consider. Like, whew, right on.
Yeah. There's a few things here, and I'm gonna have to write down that last point about faith in yourself, because I feel that I'm going to get it lost in what I'm about to say. And in saying that, like Jeremy, like if I do get lost in that, viewer, listener, you're allowed to yell at the screen, yell at the speaker, that Phil, you forgot that. But one of the things here is in that kind of rock bottom, that building a home, and that sort of fenced off garden where nothing grows. At least it was in my mind's eye when you were describing it there. Um, I call that's the comfortable misery of our loneliness. And there's that, which is known. It's awful. It's pretty barren. It's pretty awful. It's shit. But it's what I know. And me moving out of that place, because I don't, at some part of me believes that I'm not worthy of living anywhere else. And the effort of packing up that house, or like not even packing up that house, but like walking out, closing the door behind us, and then just like, walking out of that valley, or, the climb up out of that hole. That's, when we're in that place of desolation, or like it is exhausting and it takes effort. You're like, fuck, gotta
Yeah.
gotta do it. And I just knocked something out here with that full body experience. Um, and yeah, like gotta do it, gotta get out, gotta get myself out of here. And we can go, you know what? Like climbing that hill out there. I can't even see the top of it. I'm just too tired. I'm too tired. I'm just going to sit here. I don't like it. I wish things were different, but I'm just going to sit here because, like, And I want to say, viewer, listener, I want to say this to you, Jeremy, next time you're experiencing this. I want to say this to me out loud. So I know this the next time I experience loneliness. Is that I'm like, we are always, just by virtue of being human, we are always worthy of love and belonging right now, just as we are. We don't need to sit in um in that shitty house at the bottom of a valley in, with a garden that we've staked out that, nothing grows. Um, we are worthy of everything beyond that. Um, but also living in that space or being in that space has some pretty powerful lessons for us if we choose to get curious.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. One thing I would add would be going back to what we talked about towards the beginning around words and language and agency around what you believe and how you see the world, different perspectives of paying close attention and cultivating an awareness of how you speak to yourself, I think is a powerful thing. So, for example, this is pointless. This will never work. I'm not good enough.
Mm.
Uh, this will never change. All of these things, they're happening in our brain, and oftentimes it's easy to just assume that they are true or facts because we have so much evidence to support those ideas. It's like, well, my whole life, this is how it's been. Every time I've ever tried something, it's never worked. Like, you don't understand. Like, for people like me, like,
Mhm.
this is it. And I've been there, and I know how convincing my own mind is when it comes to pulling the egoic levers inside and presenting all of the data and pushing all the buttons and keeping me in this place where, as you said, it's like a comfortable safety of misery. Of
Yeah.
like, I'm miserable, but I know that I will survive this misery. And I know that this misery in some regard is safe because it hasn't destroyed me yet. And perhaps I source connection and love and attention from being miserable, right? And the alternative, which is to try something different, to believe something different, to not respond in the same way, that equals unknown, uncertain outcomes. And in some regard, that feels more dangerous than my existing suffering,
Yeah.
right? And so I often will invite people to choose better suffering. And what I mean by that is a more exciting version of suffering, a healthier version of suffering. So yeah, it's awful to go to the gym or go running or do burpees, but it's also awful to feel horrible about yourself when you look in the mirror. And heart disease is awful. And I've been told that heart attacks are awful. And so there's different kinds of suffering, right? And so in one regard, being in this place of lonely despair is a form of suffering. And it's also a form of suffering to take one more swing and send a text to a friend saying, "Hey, I'm in a dark place. Can I chat with you?" Or signing up for a blind date event or join a club or apply for
Yeah.
a job or whatever will help change the trajectory. So I think this idea of choosing better suffering, so to speak, is helpful.
Mm. I think here, like we use the words like, you get to choose your discomfort.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
sometimes loneliness is again that unintended consequence of choosing comfort. And it's if it's cold outside, like so much easier just to put on your jammies and fluffy slippers and sit on the couch watching Netflix. And scrolling on your phone till 2 a.m. And going to bed because but you've stayed warm and all that kind of stuff. But people are getting together and doing stuff outside or getting together in whatever capacity and for whatever reason. And, that, like, being outside could be uncomfortable, but there's also connective benefits in doing that. Yeah, yeah. Like, we do get to choose our discomfort, and choosing the discomfort that helps us move beyond the valley of the suck. That's totally going on as a quote, Jeremy, for this for the podcast. So, coming soon to social media near us, will be that as a quote, because it's perfect. It's so illustrative of how it feels. And I think every PhD candidate that I know has that experience in the mid levels of pretty much like in the last up until like the last 5 minutes before submitting. It feels like they're in the valley of the Sark. But yeah, it's wonderful in terms of how illustrative it is of just the general shittiness and stuff. But I wanted to come back to that point that I wrote down and I asked everybody to remind me of. And that's, having that faith in yourself, that you're worthy of better. And that feels to me like we get to listen to our heart. Where, in what you were saying before, Jeremy, you were talking about like stoking the fire within and, choosing to, these are my words, but choosing to feed that flame. And that feels to me like stopping, listening beyond, if that's a way that I can describe it, listening beyond our screaming, our shouting, our roaring mind, and tuning in to our heart, tuning into the belief, the hope that there's something beyond this. And big question for you. And I want to ask this big question for you after a quick break.
Have you ever been with someone, perhaps it's been with your partner, or maybe while you're at work or out with a group of friends, and despite having people around you, you just feel disconnected? And this is an incredibly common experience, one that I've certainly had many times. And when these things happen, we often don't really know what to do about it. Or worse, we think there might be something wrong with us for having that experience in the first place. Hi, this is Pete from the Humans Connecting team. And if you've experienced what I'm talking about, then you might find our Connection Starter course really helpful. See, these feelings, they're all just expressions of loneliness. And before I did the course, I didn't even realise I was lonely. And I certainly didn't see these feelings as an invitation to discover how I could become more connected to myself, more connected to my people, and more connected to the things that I'm most passionate about in my life. Now, the course itself, it's made up of a series of self-led videos, a comprehensive workbook, and a handful of external resources, all lovingly led and supported by Phil and the team here at Humans Connecting. By the end of it, you'll have your very own personalised connection plan that is specifically tailored to you and your unique connection needs. Look, it's made a huge impact on my life, so if you're curious about improving the connections in yours, jump over to humansconnecting.org and under the products menu, click on the Connection Starter course because you are absolutely worthy of it.
Jeremy, how do we, in your from your view, how do we listen to our hearts? How do you listen to your heart?
That's a good question. For me personally, it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing practice. I'm not as fluent with my heart as other individuals are. For example, I joke that my girlfriend is a heart antenna where she just seems tapped in. When it's a yes, it's a yes. When it's a no, it's a no. Whereas I need a day or two to sit and think and feel. And so I'm not as fluent as her, but for me, a big one is just presence practice. So I'm a big fan of meditation. I'm a big fan of going for walks in nature. I'm a big fan of trying to turn down the very loud volume in my head that is so convincing and so constant. And I'm also very like I'm sharp. I'm a smart dude. And so the voice in my head that can shout at me is often very convincing and very ironclad in the evidence and the reasoning and the rationality. And so I find that I need to do my best to shut that little fucker up and turn that volume right down. And the reason I've described it as heart whispers and fear shouts is a reminder to myself that those little whispers often appear as subtle nudges, at least for me. And it's like, and it might not be a whisper, it might be a feeling, it might be a contraction, it might be a ugh, yuck, ick, gross,
Be
versus
an ouch.
an ouch, versus a okay, or an intrigue, or a curiosity, or an excitement. And so I try to cultivate and craft space for myself to just be. Um, I think it's also important to note that for a lot of us, based on our past experiences, our trauma, etc., we might not be in a position to fully trust what our bodies are saying. They might be communicating trauma responses from the past that aren't always the truth. And so it's a bit paradoxical in that sometimes your body is lying, sometimes your brain is lying, sometimes things aren't as they seem. So that's just like a giant asterisk to those listening that like, oh, great. There is no one way um, out of this. But there, with the help of experience and guides and therapists and coaches, I think you get more adept at distinguishing what's going on.
Mm.
Um, like a woman asked me years ago, who are you really? What did she say? What part of you is really you? What part of you is a survival mechanism from childhood? And how do you tell the difference? And I was like, holy shit. I have no idea. That's such a good question. I don't know. Um, but that question for me kind of sent me on this path of curiosity to understand what that difference is. It's like what are really my desires? What are really my whispers? Versus what are being whispered at me because of the experiences that I've lived through in my past life, right? And when you talk about trauma and betrayal and sorrow and grief and shame, it's very messy inside. At least it is for me. So long long story short, I think is to be gentle with yourself and to give yourself the gift of grace and forgiveness and patience and understanding and all of these other cliche words and phrases that are so prevalent nowadays on social media, but genuinely to gift those things to yourself because those are forms of love, right? And those are forms of self-acceptance. in the same way that when we deal with toddlers, we try to be a little more patient, a little more loving, a little more understanding. Like, oh, you just haven't learned that yet. That's cool. Or, oh, you're tired. Do you need a nap? Right. So I think it is important to just be a little bit more loving to ourselves. And oftentimes people don't understand what that means, self-love. It's such a weighted term, and it's such a powerful goal. But I think the way to do that is to practice things that you can control, like patience, understanding, etc.
Mm.
So I don't know if there's an easy answer to be like, oh, Phil, I'm glad you asked. I sell for $49.99 6 razzle dazzle tips and tricks to drop you into your heart space. And if you sign up for my early bird special, you'll get that right now. And in 3 weeks, I've guaranteed you'll be in your heart. Listen to all these great testimonials. I don't have any answer like that. My personal experience has been challenging, scary, hard, frustrating, confusing, but fundamentally rewarding because it has brought me closer to who I truly am. And the closer that I get to who I truly am, the more opportunities I am given to accept and appreciate and adore and respect and love that person.
Mm.
And what a mysterious gift that is.
And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And while there's no, like 6 razzle dazzle steps for $49.99 and early bird specials and all that kind of stuff,
By the
that's
time
still,
this podcast drops, Phil, like I'm gonna have that sales page out. Like, oh, there's a market for this.
well, you pretty
You
much
know?
nailed it. This is like watching genius in like marketing genius in action. But
Yeah.
that
It,
that
it's
felt
like,
so
man,
true.
yeah, it's all the cliche stuff. It's like, well, you just
Yeah,
accept yourself. You're like, well, how do you do that? You're like, figure it
yeah,
out.
yeah,
It was just
yeah.
just love yourself. Well, how do you do that? Like, you'll figure it out. Like,
I I want to share here. So our mutual friend Mike Campbell, who I gave a shout out to in the intro, um, he knows my passion for language, and he knows how I have red flag words, and all of the humans that I coach with Mike and in our practice here know how the word just is a red flag word. And it's so easy. It's oftentimes just is kind of like seasoning that we add to a sentence or whatever for flavor or whatever. But when it comes to loneliness, um, and someone supporting someone towards feeling connected to doing connection, an answer, a spectacularly, in my opinion, unhelpful answer, you just need to do this. You just need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to do this. You need to do that. Oh, it's easy. That's what the connotation is of just. I'm really glad, accidentally, that you landed there, Jeremy, because that just drips in judgment. Drips in judgment. Because if it was just as easy as doing that, then we'd all be doing it.
I think we have Nike to blame for that. Their
I know.
marketing campaign to just do it. It's like, oh, thanks, Nike, you shame-inducing bastards. Uh,
I think like there's truth to it. In the end,
yeah,
we just need to do it.
yeah.
But we get to sit with the why the just can also be so fucking hard.
Hmm. And I think that's the big distinction is often we know what we need to do. We just don't want to accept that truth. And so the heart's whispering. The heart's like, psst, psst. The heart's going hoarse from whispering so long. It was like, psst, 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 psst. You're like, ah, So we know, like I've had interactions with clients where I'm like, come on, like, stop this. Can we just stop this game that we're playing right now? Like these excuses and these distractions and these considerations is like, it's all nonsense. I know that it's nonsense. I know that you know what you want to do. I know that you're scared. And that's okay. So like let's just drop all that and recognize that there's this ongoing battle between the head and the heart, and there's this ongoing battle between your past lived experiences and who you've been and how you've seen the world. And there's a battle between that version and this ideal fully an integrity version of yourself in the future that is kicking goals and kicking ass and living dreams. And that in the present moment, you're being pulled between those two versions of reality. And that is hard. And that
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
And there are decisions to be made. But
Yeah.
like, come on. It's time
Yeah.
to like make some moves. At some point,
Yeah.
for me at least, I just got so tired of myself. It's like, come on, man. Like, enough of this. I just grew tired of that rock bottom view and opening the door to the darkness and like not growing anything aside from dead flowers. And I like the smell of trash cans and dead skunk butt. And like, I just like, I outgrew it, man. I was like, I gotta try something else.
Yeah.
Like, I just have to do it.
Yeah.
And at
Your
some
worthiness
point, I
strikes
think
back. Mm.
it's like at some point in my experience, and this is the beautiful thing about compassion and understanding, as you alluded to, which is like, hey, if you're not there yet, like that's cool. Like I spent way longer in rock bottom than I ideally would have wanted, but like that's just how long I needed to be there. So it's like, yo, you don't want to do that yet? When I talk to these clients, I'm just phrasing that like, I understand, no judgment. It's cool. Take your time. I don't care what you do. It's your life. But also, you're paying me to nudge you and coach you and shove you forward and poke at your your limiting beliefs, right? So I don't remember what the question was, Phil, but I think it's just important to understand that this whole process, it's messy, it's confusing,
Yeah.
it's full aliveness. It'll carve you open, it'll kick you when you're down, it'll stomp on you. But also, conversely, it will offer through those same suite of experiences the opportunity to grow and expand and learn in ways unimaginable and unfathomable. And I wish it wasn't that way. I wish it was easier. I wish I genuinely did have the 7 tips and tricks. We're like, hey, take this pill, go to this temple on the hill in this country, like go eat, pray, love yourself around the world. But like we each have a different path to walk. And so what works for me or works for you, like might not
Mm.
work for others, which I think is why it's so vital to really tap into what those heart whispers are.
Yeah.
Because for me, like I left my career in science and I left the government job in Australia and I went and set off to live in a van and travel around and do this online long distance love bombs thing. But for someone else, the path would be completely the opposite. And that's okay. And that's fundamental to understanding. So, yeah,
Yeah.
good luck. Godspeed. Pray for you.
I just wanted to share here that in my experience, I really wrestle like my head and my heart like they're friendlier now. But I just wanted to say that um, I was awesome, and I still am awesome at making 1 + 1 = 9, and really like believing that. But the heart doesn't lie. The heart says to me 1 + 1 is 2. And yeah, it's 2, it's 2, it's 2. I went through life a long time in the battle between head and heart, silencing the heart and listening to my head. And it worked, but in the battle between head and heart, the heart always wins. The heart always, always wins. And what I'm learning now, practicing, I love that expression, and viewer, listener, there's a lot in that word practice. It's not perfect, it's to practice it in a similar way to practice is used in yoga contexts. But I'm practicing right now how to let my heart win and my awesome brain figure it out. So lead with my heart, allow my brain to work out how to do it. Hence, we're here now at Humans Connecting, can I just say? But also, rather than how I went through life previous to that, is like listening to the screaming mind. And it's
Just one thing to add to that. I was speaking to a client yesterday, and he referenced the safe choice. And he said something like, well, the safe choice would be to stick with this job, to get my retirement, to keep an income going. That's the safe choice. And as he was saying it, I could feel his energy completely like shut down and him constrict. And I had offered him this perspective, which is, how do you define safety? And how do you define dangerous? Because the safe choice might be dangerous, right? If the safe choice is defined as something that sucks the life force out of you for 40 hours a week, if the safe choice is, I'm going to work here until I get fired, if it's, oh, I'm going to spend 8 hours in a box that doesn't light me up, that brings me no joy, that brings me no bliss. I think to your point, at some point, the heart is going to form some alliances with the rest of the body, and it's not going to take any shit, and it's not going to stop at anything to convince you to make some changes. And that might result in sickness, breakdowns, pain, inflammation, obesity, like all kinds of stuff, right? So I'm continually trying to offer different contexts and perspectives for people to consider, myself included, right? Another example of that is, well, I want to be successful. Great. How do you define success? If you define success by the number in your bank account and the amount of possessions you own, great. Like, more power to you. If you want to define success as how close do I live to the nearest waterfall, or how many hugs did I get today, or how many somersaults did I do yesterday, right? There's different ways to describe safety, success, community, connection, all of it. And so I just encourage those listening to really give some thought to what that little heart whisper is, because it's very different for all of us. So for some of us, the idea of going and living in a van and driving to Ecuador and buying a goat farm and making cheese feels like an absolute nightmare. It feels like the star show of the Terror Dome. It's like, no way, no chance, never. And for others, that is like the shining gold star, lights me up. I am here on my planet to do that, right? And so that's why I think it's really important to recognize there's many ways up the mountain, right?
yeah.
And we're all trying to climb. You can adjust your route as you go, but just take the next immediate step towards what you think feels like the best path. Just focus on that.
I think that's brilliant, brilliant advice. And it actually, I feel like it answers my last question,
Great.
which is that was serendipitous. But the last question that we ask guests is, what's a piece of advice that you can give to someone experiencing loneliness right now?
Piece of advice. I remember once I was living on this tiny island off of Thailand, and I used to go on crab walks. This was a long time ago, and there's virtually no one living there. I didn't really have any
So it's not you
friends.
walking sideways though, right? This is like looking at
No,
crabs.
I had a digital camera, and I would just go wander around and take photos of crabs because there was nothing else to do. Like there's no internet, there's like minimal electricity, and I was feeling, and I would listen to sad songs before I went to bed. I was going through a breakup. I was just like, I was in the darkness, man. And I look back on that time now, and I just kind of like smirk at that version of me back then. I'm like, bro, what? Listen to the sad Damien Rice songs and spending hours just wandering these isolated beaches, taking photos of crabs. And with hindsight, I realize that all of those shadows, all of that darkness, all of those deep purples and pain are what makes the masterpiece of life so full and so vibrant. And it's like you can't just go to a buffet and eat rainbow sprinkles for dinner. Like you got to eat some Brussels sprouts. Like you got to have some vegetables, man. And so I see loneliness and guilt and shame and frustration as just part of a balanced diet. And years ago I realized that it was better to, not better, but years ago I realized that it was perhaps healthier to allow wholeness rather than pursue happiness. I think the pursuit of happiness is just this never-ending quest for sugar highs and rainbow sprinkled delight. Whereas the allowance and the acceptance and the embrace of wholeness is the entire lived experience. Like, I want to be carved open by life. Like, that is why we are here. Like, I want to be a wholehearted human being. I want that in some regard. And so by desiring those outcomes and those feelings, it's kind of a hack to take my power back over life. It's like, bring it, carve me open. And of course, in the moment, it's brutal. And I don't want that, but I appreciate it. And I'm learning to accept and allow myself to embrace everything that comes. And I've learned the hard way that nobody ever won a fight with reality. So it's like, I spent a long time in the pursuit of perfection and rainbow sprinkles, and it cost me a lot of time and energy. And so I think to those who are feeling lonely right now, just offer, yeah, you're in the Negredo, you're in a slow moving initiatory experience filled with revelation and things yet to be revealed. But be patient, keep your chin up, and hopefully one day too you will look back at this crab walk chapter with some semblance of appreciation too.
That's beautiful. Jeremy, this has been an absolute delight. This has been one of those conversations where, yeah, like with the mastery of language that you have and the practice of language, you've shared so much wisdom and insight and offered fantastic perspectives, both from what you observe, but also what you experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for appearing on this episode of the Humans Connecting podcast. I fear that there are going, not fear, I feel that there are going to be so many things that I refer back to, like, picking up little nuggets of wisdom that you've left for us in future content. But
Amazing.
I want to ask, like, how can people find you?
Yeah. Well, my home address is no. just come on over.
Just to send
I'll
those
make you
personal
pancakes.
chefs over to say thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Foot massage Fridays. Come on by. Um, Basically my business is called Long Distance Love Bombs. And so if you Google that, you'll find me on Instagram and on the internet. I have a podcast called the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. Um, yeah, I like to joke that I've become a man that I used to make fun of. It's like vegetarian, got the nose ring. Oh, you're in oh, I wrote a book about personal development called It'll Be Okay and You Will Be Too. And like, man, the me 10 years ago would have mocked this version relentlessly. It's like, oh, it'll be okay and I will be too. Fuck off out of here with that. Like, I'm in rock bottom, bro. You don't know. So anyway, I have an Instagram, I have a podcast, I have a book. I do events and retreats and workshops online and all around the world. Yeah. Each summer I take a group of people on a 10-day, 200-kilometer walk on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. I'm doing a retreat in Banff in July, a camping and a hiking adventure. I think that's it. Did I
Sounds
miss anything?
enough. Noah.
Yeah, got the whole personal development starter pack going, you know?
Yeah, yeah, 49.99, right?
Yeah.
And six what was it? All singing, all dancing steps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The razzle dazzle.
that's the word. Yeah.
Yeah, and like my overall mission is branded as trying to make kindness cool and compassion commonplace. I just see that
Mm.
as fundamental architecture for building the future. Oh, I have a TED Talk. I gave a TED Talk in Australia like 9 years ago called What If Kindness Was Cool? And that was my first real talk. And I had a beard. Well, I tried to have a beard. But yeah, if you're bored, you can watch that.
And with beards comes great responsibility, as I have to
Yeah.
say. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got a much better beard than I have, man. Maybe
Well,
one
if
day.
I'm going to go grey in my early 40s, I may as well make a feature of it. And
I mean, even
beard
right now, like,
tattoos. Yeah.
yeah, you got like a bright red shirt. You got like hipster Santa vibes right now. Like,
Yeah. This actually is I don't you can't see it, but it's a Grouse Mountain t-shirt.
oh,
Um,
that's just up the road.
yeah, which just yeah, near you. So which was actually just kind of serendipitous. That was the next in the rotation this morning. So
Crazy.
I'm all about British Columbia right now. But Jeremy, this has just been absolutely wonderful. I can't speak on behalf of the listener and the viewer, but my soul certainly is feeling nourished for having spent time with you today. I'm
Amazing.
very appreciative and kind of looking forward to like ways of having more chats with you, I have to say.
Yeah. To drag me back, assuming the response is neutral or positive in that direction. But yeah, Phil, thanks for having me. It's always a treat to be invited into people's online homes and to be allowed to rant and rave and say whatever I want. So thanks for being a gracious host, and also thanks for all the work that you do in the world. Um, I didn't even touch on that, but like the you all those years ago that was feeling the wound of loneliness, I would have just whispered like, "Don't worry, bro. You're gonna have a whole podcast about this one day. You're gonna be living a vibrant life. It's all gonna work out." And so this idea of turning that pain into purpose and passion is just so profound. So thanks to you and all the work that you do.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'll accept that. And when you said before, like 10 years ago, I'll be like, really? Really? This is you? So me in the suit and the tie with sitting behind the Australian flag, speaking on behalf of the Australian government. And be like, really? God, you're a wanker. Like, sure. Yep, here I am, being that wanker. Uh,
Exactly. It's the
Jeremy,
best.
thank you so much.
You're welcome, brother.
Now, if you are listening to that conversation and not watching on YouTube, I just need to let you know that Jeremy was drinking tea from perhaps one of the biggest mugs that I've ever seen. And I needed a cup of tea the size of the mug that Jeremy was drinking his tea from. And I needed a good lie down after that chat. It was just so awesome. Awesome. So, how are you doing after that chat? So, to pick up on something that Jeremy said in our conversation, a life that is only in the pursuit of happiness or only in the pursuit of eating dessert all the time is really tempting when we're unhappy, when we're in grief, when we're sitting with hard emotions like loneliness. That can feel like we're doing the equivalent of eating Brussels sprouts. And you may or may not enjoy Brussels sprouts, but let's just go with the metaphor. Brussels sprouts cooked poorly can be bland and unappetizing and unappealing. And when, we've got a plate of Brussels sprouts and we look around and everyone else is eating ice cream and cake and biscuits and all of that kind of stuff, that can look really appealing and we want that. The thing is, we get used to eating dessert. We get used to that kind of that happiness. So we need more and more and more to kind of feel anything. Point here is this: joy and the connection that joy brings, that kind of soul-nourishing joy, is so much more joyful because we understand as humans loneliness and grief and uncomfortable emotions. And the paradox of life is that sometimes these extremes can sit side by side, and that's okay. So I don't know if the pursuit of happiness is something that we need to put above all else, but the pursuit of wholeness. That's the thing that's sticking with me after that conversation. And I just wanted to check in with you to see what was there for you. What did you get from that conversation and from the wisdom that Dr. Jeremy was sharing with us? That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and for joining me and the Humans Connecting team for this episode. We'd love to hear what you thought about it. So please comment on YouTube and through our social channels. And be sure to check our website, humansconnecting.org, for details of how we can support you to get the connection that you need and deserve. There are also details about our services, which include helping you create your connected workplace, where the humans within your workplace can really, truly thrive. Finally, we're here at Humans Connecting to make a positive social impact. If you're a business and are looking for ways to support humans to feel more connected and want to also have a positive social impact, please go and check the link in the episode description to partner with us. Partnering with us could look like advertising on future episodes of our podcast or collaborating with us in other ways. There's a link in the episode description. Let's make that happen. Again, thank you so much for joining with us. We simply cannot wait to see you in the next episode. But until then, it's time for you to become an awesomely connected human.